So this is the final bit of chapter 9. You can see there's this break here. So this break in the text, indicates a certain. Don't underestimate these sorts of breaks in the text, by the way. That's a signal to the reader that we're moving on, or we're reaching a conclusion. So the sort of the non-text signals are also important here. So remember, yesterday we finished off talking about this really important paragraph here. This paragraph is really important, where he talks about carelessness of Tom and Daisy and that whole group that they represent. A group that represents something to do with the theme around character, virtue, what makes a person with integrity. So that goes right back to our first lesson on it, which was about the difference between character and personality. So on the one hand, we've got, and Gatsby again shows this tension. On the one hand, he was all gestures. Remember, first chapter, if personality was just a series of gestures, Gatsby was an amazing person. But Gatsby also, in chapter 1, we're reminded that he was exempt from this judgment that Nick presents at the end. He was exempt from it. So suggesting he was not this kind of careless person, or at least possessed some quality that made him honourable in regards to the American dream. So this is where we finish up. Gatsby's house was empty when I left. The grass on his lawn had grown as long as mine. One of the taxi drivers in the village never took a fare past the entrance gate without stopping for a minute and pointing it inside. Perhaps it was he who drove Daisy and Gatsby over to East Egg the night of the accident. And perhaps he had made it a story all of his own. I hadn't noticed that before, but just this reference to making it a story, because Nick's made it a story. Now he's talking about how the taxi driver might have made it a story. It is a story, self-consciously. So being a story, Nick's putting all the conflicts and that you would associate with a narrative. I spent my Saturday nights in New York because those gleaming, dazzling parties of his were with me so vividly that I could still hear the music and the laughter, faint and incessant, from his garden, and the cars going up and down his drive. One night I did hear a material car there, and saw its light stop at the front steps, but I didn't investigate. Probably it was some final guest who had been away at the ends of the earth and didn't know the party was over. Not just an individual party, but the whole party, the whole experience of being in that community there. On the last night, with my trunk packed and the car sold to the grocer, I went over and looked at the huge, incoherent failure of a house once more. Interesting. Incoherent failure of a house. I wonder what makes it a failure. Sometimes when you're annotating like this, if something strikes you as puzzling, just underline it and question mark it. It doesn't make much, it doesn't have much meaning for me immediately, but it is a striking phrase to call it a failure of a house. So I'm just going to underline it. Possibly. Could be about the failure of the American dream. I'm also reminded that the house was in chapter 1 again described as a factual imitation, an imitation. So maybe the imitation was a failure, that he tried to be something more than he could be. So maybe the house is symbolic of Gatsby's ambition. On the white steps, an obscene word scrawled by some boy with a piece of brick stood out clearly in the moonlight, and I erased it, drawing my shoe raspingly over the stone. Then I wandered down to the beach and sprawled out on the sand. Yeah, I'm surprised that it's interesting he doesn't sort of say what that obscene word was. There's some speculation for that. Has anyone read about any speculation? Um, the speculation that I had read is that it could have been some kind of anti-Jewish comment because Gats being a Jewish name, so he was Jewish. But that's just speculation. It's not indicated directly there. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy moving glow of a ferry boat across the sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away, until gradually I became aware of an old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes. It's a really important bit. I'm going to read it out in total, and then we'll go back and see what we find in it. So, began to melt away until I became aware of the old island here that once flowered for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. Big paragraph, you'll see it quoted in a lot of your readings. What does it link to? Which theme does it link to for you? Let's see if we can pick it up. So some of the information to help make sense of it. The old island here that once flowered for Dutch sailors' eyes. So that's making reference to the early Dutch settlers of the eastern side of the continent, of what we now know as the United States. So I think some of you in your poetry reminded us that Harlem was a Dutch word. I think, yeah, over there, Holly. Reminded us Harlem itself was a Dutch word, and New York was originally known as New Amsterdam, which is a city in the Netherlands. So this image here shows us that I think this is around the year 1640. So there's Long Island. By the year 1640, this is all Dutch territory, and we can see these images of New Amsterdam at the time with the early settlement. So it's all Dutch territory at that time until the British came and took it over. So what Carraway is doing here, or Fitzgerald through the voice of Nick Carraway, is reminding us that this was all forested area once. Now it's probably worth reminding yourself that this whole idea of an empty land leaves out the obvious people, the natives of the country at the time. So similar story in Australia where the Aboriginal natives were kind of ignored in the whole project of European settlement. Same here. So the Dutch sailor's eyes, fresh green breast of the new world. So the green breast of the new world. And the new world is how the American continent was referred to. This is a new world. But the green breast, as in a mother, nourishing new life. So all the things that you might associate with that. It's vanished trees. To me, this passage, the imagery is very cinematic. You can almost imagine if it was on film that the houses that he talks about melting away and replaced by the vanished trees, you can kind of see it appearing on the screen. Quite cinematic, and I thought similar to the ghostliness of this party being described in this section here. We're talking about the imagery here. Its vanished tree, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, which we just were told is the failed house. So those vanished trees had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. Human dreams then connects with the American dream. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent. We might go into this in some detail later, but this can be thought about as an expression of the sublime. Now, what sublime means in this sense, it's almost like without words. It's like if you go to a huge mountain range in the Himalayas and you're just faced with the immensity of nature and the smallness of yourself. You can hardly express how awesome it is, as in full of awe. You're just awestruck. And that's something that's sublime, that's what it is. You can barely express words for it. Yeah. Yeah, well, let's see how he finishes the passage. But certainly it's almost a mystical reflection on the past. This mythical. All nations have their creation myths. The myth of creating a nation, and this is one of them. That they come into this vacant land. If you ignore the natives that are there, of course, but it's full of potential because nothing is there. Um, uh, this idea that you can create something out of nothing. And once again, if you go back to the first chapter, you can kind of see that while he's talking here about man's in general capacity for wonder, in chapter 1, I won't look for it now because I'll just waste time there. You'll see that Gatsby himself is described as having an extraordinary gift for hope and wonder. So again, that kind of linking between the two chapters there. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. So the green light again. Notice the connection there between this green and the green breast. So the present day linked to the past at the end of Daisy's dock. He must have come a long way to this blue lawn. So it's contrasted. We've got what about this contrast between, blue lawn sounds odd. Remember, it was described as the blue gardens. I don't think we've seen that yet. If you go to chapter 3, and he describes, don't need to do it now, but he describes a garden as being blue gardens, which kind of made literal sense because it was all the lighting for the party, and that kind of gave it that surreal, unnatural look. But here we're talking about the blue lawn here. So this dream, the human dream's connected with the green breast of the new world, and Gatsby's dream, when he's reaching out for it, is connected to Daisy's green light. So the symbolism of the colours. So what about this contrast between the blue lawn and the green light? Blue and green. Anyone got an idea? What does blue lawn suggest? Okay. Yeah, artificial. Blue artificial. Okay, so I'm going to jump on the word true there. So it's not true. So it's fake. Okay, fake's a good one. So remember the failed house, the factual imitation of the villa, the impureness of it all. So artificial, fake, unnatural, and I think of blue lawn, as opposed to the pureness of the green forest, which is then associated with the green light. Well, certainly green has been elevated to, to symbolize the positive aspects of that whole dream. And so, and then blue is then used to oppose it, to be the contrasting element to it. So his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. So the dream is not simply to get Daisy. The dream is to, like a um, a newly born America who's getting nourishment from the green breast of nature. Gatsby is like trying to become reborn himself and become this thing greater than what he was born into. So this idea of creating not only a country is then associated with creating your identity, which is part of the American dream. You can make yourself what you want. That part of the American dream. But he did not know that it was already behind him. So what he was looking for was already behind him, somewhere in the back, in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled under the night. Now sometimes it's worth, when you see imagery like this, it's worth like drawing it or just, normally I'll do one that I'll display it with my body, but I can't video it at the moment. But imagine like you got West Egg here, you got East Egg there, you got the green light sort of emanating out that way. So Gatsby's standing there, reaching out to the green light. So when Nick says he did not know it was already behind him, to the west, it was already behind him where he came from, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city, way back in the west, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled under the night. So the setting is really as strong as you can get associated with the themes of the novel there. Gatsby believed in the green light. There's a green light again. The orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. Now this is an odd word. I looked it up. I couldn't even find it in the dictionary. But it has got its linked to the word orgasm. Orgastic. Okay, so something fundamental, some kind of well, I'll leave you to use your own connotations for that. Some future that is to be aspired to. But year by year, it recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further, and one fine morning is left incomplete. It's kind of this hope that one fine morning you'll get there, or we'll get there, or the Americans will get there. This future that we aspire to, the future that Gatsby aspired to, and perhaps a future that America has aspired to. So we beat on, boats against the current, back ceaselessly into the past. So this is again, it finishes on a strong image, picturing this image to see exactly what it's suggesting here. So when you talk about beating on, when you're referring to boats against the current, what are you talking about? So here's the east, here's the west. Receding back into the past. I'm trying to think which way I should. I'm going to draw a boat here. I'm trying to figure out which way I should point it. There are the oars, which are going to be beating into the water. I guess oars should be straight, shouldn't they? The oars are beating into the water. So you're rowing the boat. Which way is he rowing? To the west or to the east? You're trying to get to the future. Which way would you be rowing? The east or west? But we just been referred. The west was being referred to as the past. This is where he's looking back. He's looking back. What he was looking for was behind him. Remember that passage there? What he was looking for was behind him. So he's trying to row that way. So the guy in there rowing the boat, trying to go in this direction towards the future. So we beat on boats against the current. So the water's flowing this way. The water's going that way. So as you're rowing towards the future, the current is still pushing you in this direction, back to the past. Now remember earlier in the chapter, he talked about this was always a story of the West. And that maybe what Gatsby was looking for, the answer, lies in the values, the attitudes of the Western culture, the Midwestern culture. Whenever I say West, I'm always meaning Midwest, okay, not the California side of things. And so that's the chapter. And so this last bit here, the last section that we just looked at today, is all about the American dream and whether it's attainable, whether it was all just a fantasy because we just keep going faster, runner. We stretch our arms, stretching our arms like Gatsby stretched his arms towards the green light. And we've always got that hope that one morning we'll get there. One morning we'll get to this future that we're aspiring to. But the current of history, our values are always pushing us back to the past, and that's maybe that's partly a good thing because the cultural values that are important, values of compassion, integrity, honor, duty, maybe those are the things that we should hang on to rather than try and appeal to all the superficial side of the world, like material possessions. That second aspect of the American dream that we read about. Whereas this is the first original idea of the American dream. Before people thought about, oh, I'm going to have a nice house and a car and all this stuff. It was about, what kind of person do I want to be in this world and create myself in there. Okay, so I'll stop it there